For many, the church answers the most basic existential questions about how we are, why we are as humans, and how we should be. Our souls pull very instinctually to these answers to learn the very purpose of why we have come into being. But for others, the most salient answers belong to what are we, or what should we be? Questions that some have sought after for millennia. Maria the Virgin Witch tells the story of a witch who hates war and violence, set during the 100 Years' War between France and England. Every battle that Maria comes across, she stops with the extraordinary power of her unholy witchcraft. Maria's ideals are juxtaposed by two primary entities: the Church, led by Monk Bernard, and Heaven, represented by the Archangel Michael. Although they both align themselves with the God of the Bible, the Church and Michael have two very different agendas when it comes to why they act as antagonists to Maria. The Church's primary desire is to keep Maria from interfering in the war so that God's will can be done in it, and also specifically to Maria that she renounce her magic and witchcraft and join the Church. They see her desire to see no war as evidence of her desire to be saved by Heaven from what the Church has termed heresy. Michael, on the behalf of Heaven, only asks that Maria not use her great magical powers to intervene in conflicts of man, as it upsets the order God has set into place. Maria's response is thus. In this anime, Maria, like the other witches in the show, represent a strange intersection of femininity, sexuality, and queerness. Witches in literature represent often female power. Maria and the other witches are more than women, and their power is also as far beyond the collective might of mortal men as the Archangel Michael is above them. The feudal town and cities look to witches as sources of medicine and favor in war. As testaments of the power of their femininity and sexuality, the witches dress in revealing clothing as a part of their culture and even utilize their apparent sexuality as currency, likening the witches to medieval prostitutes. They use their familiars to sleep with men who have set off to war for money, because they will by and large be without women. For her own purposes, Maria employs the help of two familiars to do her bidding: owls transformed into succubi. Artemis, named after the Greek goddess of the hunt, enthralls soldiers at night to engage them in sexual exploits in order for them to lose their will to battle, turning them away from the war. She employs also Priapus, an incubus, created after Artemis finds that many of the soldiers are gay. Priapus is the name of the Greek god of fertility, who's known for his enormously large... Ironically, Priapus has no manhood, for Maria has never seen one to give him. Priapus is not happy about this. But the decision is apt, as Maria's embodiment of female power and sexuality would not stoop to utilize the object of men's sexual power to enforce her will, even in her own servant. Priapus becomes another representation of Maria's queerness, a man that's not fully a man, who's designed to wield sex as a tool. This is also the crux of Maria's queerness. She is a witch, a woman, and yet beyond the power of men. She uses sex and magic against men to reach her own ends and to undercut the order of Heaven. Yet, in practice, she represents the most sought-after ideals of the Church. She's a virgin, but she uses sex for profit. She hates war and desires only for peace and gives medicine a way to heal the sick, but wields tremendous destructive forces as a witch. As Maria explains this dichotomy, she has no desire to live up to the expectations of the Church. Her virginal innocence and her distaste for war and death is only circumstantially aligned with the Church's ideals. She would throw away her virginity any time on a whim if forced. Maria's story represents an eternally present dynamic between the Church and queer identities that don't fit westernized categorical machinations of biblical principles. The marginalized witch population is analogous to black people oppressed categorically by the church through white supremacist readings of the Bible. To homosexual people whose sexual orientations the modern church felt to be so categorically different from heterosexuality that the term homosexual, that had no conceptual equivalent in the scriptures, was manipulated into later translations of the Bible while the term heterosexual is absent. Transgendered persons isolated and shunned, and intersex persons born betwixt the frameworks of biological sex are left in a social, spiritual, and gender limbo within churches. The mentally and physically disabled left to fend for themselves within the walls that treat disability as spiritual weakness, called the church, all a manifestation of benevolent bigotry. In the series, Maria is often asked to both renounce her witchhood and marry a man with whom she has become well acquainted, a solution often offered by churches to those with queer realities, as if the act of marriage will grant her automatic favor with heaven, as if behavior modification will somehow change her identity. Maria again rejects this as a false choice. She acknowledges that her virtue and being a witch are part of her identity. Like the many queer identities in the world, her witchhood is something she claims she was born with, that is bound to the very foundations of her heart. Michael, commanded by heaven, cursed her, that if she were ever to lose her virginity, her powers would be taken from her. But even if she chooses a life as a normal human on her own, Maria declares that she will always be a witch. Michael, in his last trial of the case of Maria the Virgin Witch, asks every person Maria has touched to speak what she means to them. He asks both the lowly and wealthy, the pious and the heathen, what they say of her. They say many things, that she is a loathsome heretic as a witch. But some tell that she is a great help to the people, that she is a healer, protector, a champion. Michael is given word from God that from then on Maria is to be regarded as a natural part of the order of the world, and that she is to be treated with love as a dear neighbor of God's people. Maria softens her heart towards heaven and takes her place within that order. Maria never forsakes her witchhood. Maria the Virgin Witch, in her rebellion against heaven and the church for the persecution of her kind and their indifference toward the suffering of man in war, speaks to a queer religion, one that aligns itself with heaven in virtue, faith, and in spirit, but one that is practiced in flesh that doesn't fit the mold of femininity or masculinity, one that has unworldly powers unknown to both man and womankind. Maria's rebellion is a clarion call to all those queer racial, physical, and gender identities that battle with the instinctual pull of their spirits to a righteous higher power and a world that wishes to colonize, conquer, and destroy their flesh as the wages of salvation required by those whose graces never required an equivalent sacrifice. Maria's queer religion tells us that it isn't the job of God's children to sift the flesh of others to weigh their iniquity on scales against their own, for the righteousness of heaven is far beyond the comprehension of earth. It is to recognize that the queer nature of this world and that of man is as ancient today as the world itself. That all men have a place in the order of this world no matter how they were born or what they become. It tells us that all must be regarded as neighbors, treated with the fullness of love and compassion, not in spite of difference, but in recognition of the oneness of human creation.